we are going to finish up animal behavior notes today. And so we're looking at learned behaviors. And so you do need to copy this title. Learned behaviors require practice in order to achieve mastery. So we talked about what is a behavior. A behavior is a response to a stimulus. And so when we look at behaviors responding to a stimulus, there's two types. There are innate behaviors, and then there are learned behaviors. And so a learned behavior requires practice in order to achieve mastery. Now, if we look at the alarm clock, an example of an innate behavior would be waking up at a loud noise. Nobody ever taught you to wake up if there's a loud noise. So waking up if there's a loud noise would be an innate behavior. However, sleeping through an alarm clock, that would be a learned behavior. And that's a type of learning that we call habituation. It's actually the halting of a behavior if there is no reward and no punishment. And so this shows that learning requires motivation. So if there is no reward and no punishment, a lot of times we learn to stop a behavior. Halt also means stop. So if your innate behavior is to wake up at a loud noise, but if there's no reward for waking up when the alarm clock goes off, and no punishment for not waking up, then you just ignore the alarm clock, and that's called habituation. Another set of behaviors that we're going to look at are called trial and error learning. It's also known as what's called operant conditioning. When I think of operant conditioning, I think of operating a car, learning how to drive a car. When you're learning how to drive a car, you make some mistakes. You press on the gas too fast or the brake too slow, and you learn by making mistakes, and that's called operant conditioning. Notice this word, conditioning. If you think of conditioning like physical conditioning, it means to repeat. So the word condition means to repeat. If you've ever looked at the bottle of hair conditioner, it might say apply the conditioner, rinse, and repeat. Conditioning means to repeat. So when we look at learning, we can ignore a stimulus if we learn that there's no motivation. We can learn to get better at something. And so trial and error is really about improving with practice, like going through a maze. So those are two types of conditioning. Another type, and this is the first type of learned behaviors that were actually studied in other animals, it's called classical conditioning. Classical conditioning is learning to associate two unrelated stimuli. So for example, if we look at two unrelated stimuli, we might have the stimulus of food and the stimulus of a bell. For every animal, the stimulus of food makes them prepare for digestion. So, a scientist named Ivan Pavlov actually took a dog and watched his normal or innate response to food. And so when you let a dog smell food, then they're actually going to start to salivate or drool because they're preparing for digestion. Before he started his experiment, he took a tuning fork or a bell and rang the bell, and the dog did nothing. The dog didn't know anything about the bell. Okay, I hear a noise. During the experiment, every time he had food, he would ding the bell or the tuning fork. And the dog, seeing the food, would start to salivate. And after the conditioning was over, if he just dinged the bell or the tuning fork, then the dog would salivate. And this is because the dog had learned to connect the tuning fork with the appearance of food. And so the dog associates. And so we want to put a star are by this word. Classical conditioning is also known as associative learning. The dog eventually salivated at the sound of the bell, signaling they had learned the bell and food were related. So we call it associative learning. When we look at behaviors, and we said there are innate and learned, most behaviors are actually a combination of the two. Most behaviors have an urge that is innate, meaning I want to do this behavior, but they often have to learn the correct method. So a really good example is language. If you look at how we learn to speak, it is innate for animals to make sound. Babies cry. But then we try to teach them what is the right way to ask for attention. So there are a few unusual ones here. The first one is imprinting. Imprinting is the first step to learning the behaviors of your species. The urge to follow or copy is innate. Remember, urge means that you want. You want to do that. So the urge, or all animals want to follow or copy an organism, but they must learn who the correct role model is. There's a really famous experiment with a geese and some ducklings where they didn't put the mother there, they put a robot goose, or they put a stuffed animal goose, and they tried to see what would the ducklings do. And so they wanted to follow something, but they needed to learn who was the right role model. Communication is also a really good example of the innate urge and the learned method. I want to do it, but I need to learn how. Animals communicate by using sight, sound, and even chemicals. And we need to put a big star here. Insects use chemicals called pheromones to communicate direction and to help find a mate. So looking at how some behaviors are a combination. The other example is the honeybee waggle dance. It's an example of insects communicating with each other. Forager bees are able to use the dance to communicate distance and direction by using vibrations and chemicals. So when a honeybee is out finding flowers, it comes back to the hive. And it wants to tell the other bees where to go to find those flowers. And so it performs the waggle dance. It uses direction to tell them where to go to find the other honey. And this is an example of both innate and learned. The honeybees do have to learn what is the most effective way of communicating. That is the end of these notes. You'll make sure that you have completed your summary box and begin to work on your other assignments as well.